You're all set, Senator Gray.
All right, thank you. Welcome. I am Senator James Gray, and today we will be having public hearings on House Bills 7798, 263, and 523. Before we get started, I will go through the checklist to ensure that this meeting that we are holding is in compliance with the right to know law. As chair of the Senate Election Law and Municipal Affairs Committee, I find that due to the state of emergency declared by the governor as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic and in accordance with the governor's emergency order 12, pursuant to executive order 2020-04 and its extensions, this public body is authorized to meet electronically. Please note that there is no physical location to observe and listen contemporaneously to this meeting, which was authorized pursuant to the governor's emergency order. In accordance with the emergency order, I'm confirming that we are providing public access to the meeting by telephone, with additional access possible by video and other electronic means. We are utilizing Zoom webinar for this electronic meeting. All members of the committee and selected legislative staff have the ability to communicate contemporaneously in this meeting through this platform, and the public has access to contemporaneously watch and listen to the meeting on Zoom and YouTube and via the phone by following the directions and links provided on the general court website. Notice of the necessary information for accessing the meeting in the Senate calendar. We are providing a mechanism for the public to alert the public body during the meeting if there are problems with access. If anyone has a problem, please email remotesenate@leg.state.nh.us or call 603-271-6931. In the event that the public is unable to access the meeting due to problems on our end, we will adjourn and reschedule. Please note that all votes taken during this meeting shall be done by roll call vote. Finally, let us start the meeting by taking a roll call of attendance. When each member states their presence, please also state where you are and if anyone else is in the room with you during this meeting, which is required under the right to know law. I will call the roll. Senator Birdsall.
Hi, Senator Birdsall, District 19. I am actually in Corolla, North Carolina, and I am in the only quiet room in the house, the bedroom, and my husband will be coming in and out, and I have...
Senator Ward.
Good morning. I am Senator Ruth Ward from District 8. I'm in my home and started, and I am alone in the room.
Senator Susie.
Good morning. This is Donna Susie. I am at my home in Manchester, and I'm alone.
Senator Perkins Quokka.
Good morning, Senator Perkins Quokka. I'm at my mother's house in Strong, New Hampshire, and I am alone in the room.
And I am Senator James Gray, District 6. I'm in my home in Rochester, and I'm alone in this room. No one, dares to come in here, All right. Does anyone have any comments before we start the public hearing on, I believe? All right. Seeing none, we'll please call the prime sponsor.
All right, now I'll bring in the prime sponsor.
Good morning. Can you hear me?
Yes, we
Yeah,
can.
you're fine.
Thank you. So I believe you've all gotten my testimony.
You need to introduce
Oh,
yourself.
I'm sorry. I'm Ralph Boehm, Hillsborough District 20, Town of Litchfield, and I should have known better. So thank you, Chairman Gray and members of the Senate Election Municipal Law Committee. This is an act requiring town and city clerk to provide daily notification to the Secretary of State for any filings for state rep. And I won't read my whole testimony because I'll just give some examples. Right now, the town clerks daily must supposedly, by law, mail in the filings. Even with the mail, that might take 4 or 5 days, and which means it's not going to get to the Secretary of State's database until that time later. And for example, my town clerk mailed the day I filed, which was the very first day, picked it by USPS the next following morning. It was Monday before it showed up in the Secretary of State report. My town clerk thinks this is a good idea. And all other candidates file at the Secretary of State's office except for state representative. And their filings appeared that day on the Secretary of State's database. Why should our office of state rep be second rate to other offices? Also, from talking to some years ago, the Secretary of State's office, some town clerks have forgotten to send the documents. And this will make it easy for the Secretary of State to follow up on the paperwork. So what this does is tells these town clerks, city clerks, when somebody files, you report it, name and address, to the Secretary of State that day by email or whatever Secretary of State deems appropriate, and then follow it with the paperwork that day. That way people will know by looking at the Secretary of State database who has filed and should they file or whatnot, and will definitely help. So with that, thank you. I'll take any questions.
Questions from committee members?
Could I just ask one, Mr. Chairman?
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you. Thanks. Representative Bohm, so the requirement would be that a list would be submitted. Would the clerk still be required to mail the actual documents?
Yes,
Okay.
and yeah, I mean, email a couple of seconds and email in and then follow it. And this is, like I said, will allow the Secretary of State to follow up if they have not gotten the paper documents, which has happened in the past.
Okay. Thank you.
Additional questions? All right, seeing none. On my list, we only had the one person testifying. Do we have anyone else?
So I have no one else signed up to speak. If anyone else would like to speak on House Bill 77, please raise your hand now.
Is there anyone from the Secretary of State's office on the call?
Yes, we have
Yeah.
David Scanlon. Yep.
So David Scanlon, if you would care to make some comments, I would appreciate it.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And members of the committee, I'm David Scanlon, Deputy Secretary of State. Wasn't really planning to testify on this bill. You know, it's certainly something that we can do. It's probably a good idea. As Representative Bohm stated, right now the clerks are responsible for mailing the filing to us the day it's filed with the clerk. There have been problems, especially last year, or in the last election cycle, with mail being received by us in a timely manner. You know, we can start the process if we receive those filings electronically, and then if we don't receive the mailing, do the appropriate follow-up afterwards. So with that, I would be happy to answer any questions.
Questions from the committee members? Seeing none, thank you. If anyone else has wants to testify, please raise your hand.
And I see no hands, Senator.
All right, we'll close the public hearing on House Bill 77, and we have 5 minutes.
Do you want to go into exec, Mr. Chair?
That would be fine.
I'll second that.
So we have a motion and a second to go into executive session. I will call the roll. Senator Birdsell,
Yes.
Senator Ward,
Yes.
Senator Susie,
Yes.
Senator Perkins Cuoco,
Yes.
and chair votes yes. Do we have a motion?
Ought to pass.
Second.
Ought to pass on House Bill 77 with a second. Do we have any comments? Okay, seeing none, I'll call the roll. Senator Birdsell,
Yes.
Senator Ward,
Yes.
Senator Susie,
Yes.
Senator Perkins Coca,
Yes.
and the chair votes yes. Do we
Motion.
have a motion? We have a motion for consent. Do we have a second? Second by Senator Birdsell. Call the roll. Senator Birdsell,
Yes.
Senator Ward,
Yes.
Senator Susie,
Yes.
Senator Perkins Coca,
Yes.
and the chair votes yes. Do we have anybody that wants to take this one out?
I'll
Senator
take it.
Birdsell. Okay. Do you, Trish, do you have the list of bills that we're still working on?
Yes. So we have HB 223. That's the one Senator Susie is working on amendment. She has it.
All right, we'll let her speak to that before we go on.
Sure. I do have the language drafted, Mr. Chairman. I do want to speak to the prime sponsor and the Deputy Secretary of State to make sure we have consensus, but the language has already been drafted and I will get that to them.
Very good. Tricia?
And then we have HB 243.
Okay, 243, also with the words that I was proposing. There is also with the words that I was proposing. There is fear that we would get down to individuals, identifying certain individuals and what they took for healthcare and things like that. So I need to go back and modify those words to make sure that that doesn't happen. So again, it's work in progress, but please bear with me. We are trying to get comments from all the different people out there, the ones that supposedly are not providing enough information, but on the other hand, there's groups that have so many sub accounts that it would provide a information that we should not be divulging if we pass the bill. So we'll work on that. We still have a minute or two. What's the next one on the list?
The next one was HB 285, and that's the one Senator Birdsell had done an amendment. The amendment number is 1235. I did
All
send
right.
that out
Yes.
this morning. Again.
Okay, I know Marie had given me a copy of it. I don't know what I did with it. I know I had brought it down with me, but it had the language that the Secretary of State wanted, and I think it was good to go at that point.
All right, we won't do anything with it at this particular break in our session today, but maybe if we have time at the end, or we would go back to that. So if anyone wants to take a look at that and we have a minute or two somewhere, then you may want to do that. All right, so at this point, we're ready for our next bill. We need to come out of executive session.
Will we come out of executive session?
We have a motion to come out of executive session. The second, I will call the roll. Senator Birdsell,
Yes.
Senator Ward,
Yes.
Senator Susie,
Yes.
Senator Perkins Coca,
Yes.
and the chair votes yes. We are out of executive session and we are ready for the next bill, which is
98.
98. Thank you. And if you call the prime sponsor.
All right, I'll bring in Representative Joe Sweeney.
Representative Sweeney.
Oh, hi there. Thank you so much. I believe Representative Ross Berry is in the webinar and he's going to speak to this bill.
Sure.
All right.
I will
Thank
bring
you.
him in.
We can leave you both up for, oh, well,
You don't want to hear what he has to say.
we don't want to hear what he has to say. Oh, that's
No.
interesting.
Thank you for listening to this bill. This is HB 98, which is a bill to move the state primary back most likely into June. So this has been a priority for us on the House side to end what we refer to as the incumbent protection program that is the state slate's primary. So as you're all currently aware, we have one of the latest state primaries in the country, if not in some years, the latest state primary in the country. Sometimes Rhode Island goes after us, but we are usually on the same day as Rhode Island and we're last in the country. So I remind my friends from out of state that we are first in the nation for presidential primary, and then we are usually last in the nation for state primary. And this creates some interesting effects. So one of the biggest problems is, as all of you know, being in competitive elections, is that when you are in a primary and your opponent who is an incumbent is not, you are talking to different worlds, right? You're focused on winning your primary versus winning a general election. And it creates an inherently unbalanced election for the candidate who's not in a primary when their opponent only has 6 to 7 weeks to end a primary campaign, stop, turn around, and begin a general election campaign. And as we all know, the voters in those elections are vastly different. So this bill would move our primary back into June, which nationally would actually put us kind of in the middle of the calendar. So we're going from kind of dead last to into the middle. There's been some concerns raised about this bill that I think I'll just address up front. Obviously, I'm happy to answer any questions that you have. One of which is, what do we do about this year in redistricting? So we amended the bill to give the Secretary of State the power to move the primary forward. If we put it in June, we'll be moving it forward down the calendar if redistricting is not done. So what we did there was kind of legislatively nuanced. The Secretary of State currently has the power to move the filing date if redistricting is not done. So all we did was we tacked on the ability to move the actual primary date if redistricting is done. So that was we originally had some language in there about court cases and all that, and then we realized no, it's actually way easier if we just give Secretary Garner the ability to move this. There's been concerns raised about turnout. So a UNH poll showed that this bill will have zero effect on the number of people voting in a primary. Literally the exact same number of people who said they'd be less likely to vote in the primary were matched by the number of people who said they would be more likely to vote in a primary. Going back to the, excuse me, the messaging, it is my belief that voters should have the opportunity to hear from both sides equally. I am a Republican, and I have to believe as a Republican that my ideas versus the ideas of the other side will win in an election. And I am sure my Democrat colleagues would say the exact same thing for their side, that they believe that their ideas will win in the general election. So I firmly believe that it's up to the voters to decide. The voters deserve to hear from both sides equally. And I believe my side will win, but I'm sure that the other side will say that their side will win. And that is ultimately democracy at work, is it not? The final piece of information or objection that I get raised by this is that this would put filing into the legislative calendar. That is how the overwhelming vast majority of states operate. And I think we're actually people who raise that argument, not to ascribe motive to them, but I believe they sell us short. I think we have the ability to walk and chew gum at the same time. And if I was a senator, I'd be a little jealous because you'll get to go file your paperwork in Concord while you're already there. And I'll have to make a trip down to the town clerk. I firmly believe that, these primaries traditionally for incumbents are kind of non-issue affairs. So I don't think it actually affects incumbents in that way, people who are currently using legislation. But that is, I think I've addressed the core issues of the bill. I'm obviously happy to take any questions that anyone has.
Questions from the committee?
Yes.
Senator Susie.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Representative Berry. I am very supportive of the concept of making this change. I think it's long overdue, but I just had a couple questions regarding your language about the Secretary of State determining whether the primary would occur this time or whether it would be the following year. It appears that he would not only be setting the primary date, but he would be setting all of the filing dates as well. Is it your intent that he have discretion in when that filing period would be, or that the filing period would have to be in March if it's June?
No, so he currently has the ability to move the filing date as it is, entirely up at his discretion. So we tacked on the primary date to do that. So it's, I'm a big believer in Secretary Gardner. I think he's impartial. I think he would understand that if we do pass this, or if you guys do pass this, the intent of the legislators to move the primary up. And I believe he would honor that, provided that all the challenges of redistricting will be met. We know that there will be legal challenges to redistricting regardless of what is passed. It happened 10 years ago. It happened 10 years before that. It's going to happen, right? It's inevitable. So we also, if past indicator 10 years ago, there were, I believe, 3 legal challenges to redistricting, and they were all settled within about a month. That could be the case this year, or whatever way you want to look at it, this year, next year. It could not be, we don't know, right? What we do know is that more than likely there will be legal challenges that will delay redistricting, on top of the fact that the data from redistricting won't be released till the block level data will not be released until September of this year. So I'm sorry, I went on a little bit of tangent there. To answer your original question, yes, it is our intention to give him the discretion to expand his existing powers of discretion for the actual date. I'm sorry, I came back, finally answered your question, but I had to get the rest off.
Thank you for that. And just one follow-up, if I may, was there any discussion about either an August date or another date, or was June?
So there's 2 other bills that we've retained in the House, one of which comes from the Secretary of State's office, and that's to move it back a week to be in compliance with UOCAVA. Because next year we won't be able to get our absentee ballots out in time to be federally compliant. That's how tight our current compressed calendar is, that we literally cannot get absentee ballots out fast enough. And there is discussion about August. We believe August doesn't really accomplish the goal here. We're talking about taking, a 6-7 week primary out to a 10-week primary at that point. We chose the middle of the calendar because that's what kind of the rest of the country does, and we think that gives everybody the best opportunity.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, they are looking for me at that other hearing. I do have one question of you, Representative. What happens if I move the effective date of this till after the next primary?
We would probably begrudgingly still pass it because beggars can't be choosers, but I would ask not to do that.
Well, and the reason I ask is that some of the complications, because this is a redistricting year, would be resolved just by doing that date. So if you could be more specific about your objections, I would appreciate it either now or later.
Yeah, I'm happy to address it now. We think this bill is good. We think it's good for the voters, and we want to get it installed as quickly as possible.
Okay.
And one other point, the last time we changed the primary date, actually to kind of dovetail back into Senator Soucy's question, the last time we changed the state primary date was 1910. So that was the reason why we wanted to move it back to June. Is if we move it to August and August doesn't work, we don't want to wait another 110 years to move it.
Okay. With that, I'm going to turn the hearing over to Senator Birdsell. I only have one person left on my list of people, and I will be back with you as soon as I can.
All right. Trisha or Kirsten, who do we have?
All right, I'll bring in the next speaker. Next we have Alvin C.
All right. Thank you, Mr. C. Go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Chair and members of the committee. Can everybody hear me okay?
Yes.
Very good. I'm in support of, I'm Alvin C. and I live in Loudon, and I am in support of House Bill 98. I think this does what, as the sponsor stated, I think it's a good deal on that. I did want to bring up something that this bill has an effect on another area that isn't changed. is changed as a result of it. And it's for candidates filing by nomination papers. RSA 655-43 specifies filing deadlines, but it has it relative to the primary and the filing period for the primary. So that makes the declaration of intent for filing for a primary a candidate for nomination makes it in at the end of April, and then their nomination papers would be due before the primary. And I think this makes it a little bit too early. And in fact, there's a court case in First Circuit. It was Anderson v. Quinn. It struck down Maine's April petition deadline in 1980. And New Hampshire's in the First Circuit, so the precedents may apply. My suggestion would be to amend RSA 655-43, Roman 1 and Roman 2, such that the declaration of intent would be due during May or June or both, but before the primary, and having nomination papers due in August. This would ensure that any losing primary candidate would not be able to file this way, and the nominating papers would be submitted in ample time to prepare general election ballots. And I thank you for your time, and I will answer any questions if you have any.
Any questions from the committee?
Mm.
All right, seeing none, thank you, Mr. C.
Thank you.
And if anyone else would like to speak on House Bill 98 at this time, please raise your hand. And Senator Birdsall, I'm not seeing any hands raised.
All right, with that, I will close the hearing on House Bill 98. And what time do we have?
We are 2 minutes away from the next one.
All right, so we'll
Grab another cup of coffee.
Yeah.
exactly. So we'll be back at 9:30. All right, I am back. I don't know
I'm supposing that our other hearing is over and that we are waiting to start the one at 9:30.
Yes.
Correct.
And if I had my list, I could tell you which one that is.
It's 263.
263, okay. We've got lots of people signed up for 263, so, but only one person on my list saying that they want to testify. Okay, and it looks like we can call the prime sponsor.
All right.
Thank you, Chairman Gray and members of the Senate Election Law Municipal Affairs Committee. I'm Representative Joe Sweeney of Salem. I am proud to introduce House Bill 263 relative to campaign finance reform. The goal of this legislation is to streamline our existing practices, remove barriers to entry for new candidates for office, and decrease confusion surrounding candidate filing and update our state's campaign finance laws to ensure that all candidates, whether they are running for the first time or the 40th time, can navigate and understand the system that governs campaign finance in New Hampshire. Currently, New Hampshire law allows candidates to agree to a voluntary expenditure limit. The incentive provided under current law to voluntarily limit campaign expenditures is an increase in the amount of money candidates can raise per donor per election period. There are 3 current periods of time that are created via our current campaign finance structure. Exploratory phase before filing, the primary election phase that runs from the day a candidate files to the state primary election, and the general election phase that runs from the day after the primary to the state general election. If a candidate agrees to voluntarily limit their expenditures, they are limited according to which office they are seeking as to what they can spend, but can raise $5,000 from a single source in each period, totaling $15,000 for the total cycle. They can raise more per donor, but they can spend less. The amounts are written into statute and do not increase cycle to cycle to reflect increased costs to campaigns or operations as a candidate. If a candidate does not agree to voluntarily limit their expenditures, they can spend as much as they like on the effort, but they can only raise $1,000 in the primary and $1,000 during the general election. Since they cannot agree or disagree to the expenditure limit before they file their candidacy, they can raise $5,000 in the exploratory phase. As a result, candidates who don't agree to the voluntary expenditure limit are capped at raising $7,000 per donor per complete 2-year cycle. This is referred to as the 5,000 plus 1,000 plus 1,000 rule. Most candidates for office do not agree to the voluntary expenditure limits. Thus, they fall under this $7,000 per cycle per donor limit. The bill before the committee today removes the voluntary expenditure limit and the exploratory phase from existing state law and changes the limits per election to $3,500 per donor. This would maintain the $7,000 per donor per cycle limit that currently exists for those candidates who do not voluntarily limit their expenditures. This move would reduce the candidate filing form by about 1/3, as the last column on the state's filing paperwork regarding the voluntary expenditure limit would no longer be necessary. This would also streamline campaign finance reports by only having 2 periods of time, the primary and the general election. The primary phase would begin when a candidate starts running for office, and the threshold to file with the Secretary of State's office would remain unchanged at $500 raised/spent for candidate committees and political organizations. This campaign finance reform package also maintains an additional provision in an effort to upgrade and modernize our campaign finance process. Currently, political organizations that are not candidate committees, commonly referred to as PACs, are allowed to raise $5,000 per election in the primary and in the general, so that they can raise $10,000 per donor during a 2-year cycle. This reform also increases that limit to $10,000 per election or $20,000 per cycle. While federal campaign finance operates on a yearly threshold limit of $10,000 per year instead of per election, this change would put our state limits for political organization fundraising in line with the current federal limits. Organizations that are focused on state elections and issues taking place under the Concord Dome should not be expected to operate at half the limit federal political organizations operate under. By increasing these limits, we will put our state laws more in line with federal campaign finance laws, lessening the potential for confusion for political organizers in the granted state. I know I just presented a great deal of information regarding the proposed legislation, and I would be happy to field any questions from the committee. Thank you.
Questions from committee members? Seeing none. There you are, Trish. Kirsten. Do we have anyone else that has put their hand up?
If anyone else would like to speak on the bill at this time, please raise your hand. And I don't have any other speakers signed up either, and I'm not seeing any hands.
Do we have anybody from the Secretary of State's office on the Zoom call?
We do still have David Scanlon on here. I'll bring him in.
Deputy Secretary Scanlon, I want to put you on the spot again.
You're doing a good job at that today.
Thank you.
We really don't have an opinion on this change. The campaign finance laws obviously are designed for the candidates. This seems to be a kind of an amount neutral type policy on how much a candidate can raise. The only comment that I would make is that the campaign finance laws that are on the books in New Hampshire are still relatively confusing and sometimes difficult to explain to potential candidates or political committees. And I, for one, would enjoy the opportunity to work with members of the legislature to try and clean that up and make it easier for everybody to follow. And that's really all I have, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, it wouldn't cause any undue burden on the Secretary of State's office, the difference in the record keeping, or? We would have to make some changes to our campaign finance system, the online campaign finance system. That is not something that's unusual for us. The legislature changes laws every session, and we deal with that. So this change would require some modification to the online campaign finance system, but I don't see that as a problem. Okay, thank you very much. Do any of the other senators have questions of the Deputy Secretary? Seeing none, thank you very much. Kirsten, do we have anybody else?
We have no other hands raised, Senator.
Okay, with that, I'll close the public hearing on House Bill 263. And we have a couple of minutes before we open our last public hearing for the day, which is 5:23.
Yes. Have 10 minutes.
Well, did I give them an extra 10 minutes? All right, then we might as well, if no one objects, go into executive session. Do I have a motion? And we have a motion and a second to go into executive session. And I will call the roll. Senator Birdsell.
Yes.
Senator Ward.
Yes.
Senator Susie.
Yes.
Senator Perkins Coca.
Yes.
And the chair votes yes. All right, we are in executive session. We were discussing House Bill 285 and Amendment 1235 when we last left. Could you put Amendment 1235 up on the screen?
Yes.
Senator Birdsall, do you want to run us through this, or?
hold on, I'm having a little problem with my computer. Anyway, basically, this is the language that the Secretary of State wanted in there. And, Trish, can you go down? I forgot, this is not on my screen, so I can't move it.
Oh, okay, yep.
Where is it?
That's
Wait, is this? Oh, okay. So the Secretary of State wanted the word investigation out. So where on line 8, where it says, where there is not a full match of name, date of birth, and residence, the Secretary of State shall provide information of partial matches for further, instead of investigation, we replaced it with review and confirmation by the town or city pursuant to paragraph 5, sorry. And I'm not sure that we change, the database shall maintain addresses in accordance with the United States Postal Service standardized addresses as described. But again, there was an area, I think on line 28, where should any voter appear to be a duplicate, registration information shall be forwarded to the supervisors of the checklist of the city or town were registered for review and confirmation, not investigation. Such clerks shall notify the state of the result of such, again, review. And so that's really, and when we got to further investigation, it was under the Attorney General's, forwarded to the Attorney General for further investigation or prosecution. So those were the language that the Secretary of State wanted.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
I can't see everybody, but does anyone have any comments on the amendment?
Mm-mm.
Now I can see you.
Ask one question, Mr. Chairman. So
Certainly, Senator.
so in section 4, which is the centralized voter database, Senator Byrd, so you mentioned the changes with the term investigation. And
Yep.
I think I also had a note, and I'm just trying to recall what the issue was, that there was something confusing, that there should be a reference made to supervisors of the checklist in paragraph B. And as I said, I don't recall, it was a note I put in the margin. I don't know if that was something.
Yes, in the hearing report too.
Where was this, section B, 1B?
Section 4.
Yep. Oh, yep. Centralized.
Okay, I found it. Okay, so we've changed it at the end of line 27. Because I think that was another concern of the.
Be forwarded to the supervisors of the checklist of the city or town were registered. Yep.
Okay. I had a lot of markup on that bill, so I just was trying to double check.
Additional questions from any of the committee members? Any of the committee members want to seek information from any of the resources we might have on the line? Seeing none, it sounds like we will have, Senator Perkins Cook, you just raised your hand.
Well, I was just going to make the comment that I do, I just want to point out that if we were part of a multi-state electronic registration system, that much of this, could be done electronically and be easier on our municipal and state staff. But I don't think that's going to get fixed in this bill. So.
Well,
thank you for your input, Senator.
You're welcome.
And with that, I think that if we got a motion of ought to pass, that sounds like what the committee is looking for. Senator Susie?
Question, just one last
Senator
question.
Susie, question.
The issue about the subscription to the service from the post office and whether or not cities and towns, whether or not the Secretary of State did subscribe. I don't believe they did, and whether or not cities and towns would now have to.
If the Deputy Secretary is still available.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Senator Susie, yes, I looked into that after the hearing on the bill. The subscription for that is something that we can cover in our normal operating funds. It's not that expensive. And once we do it, it's my understanding that because it'll be tied in directly with ElectionNet, that all of the city and town supervisors of the checklist will have access to that information. So it's something that I think we can implement, and we'll move in that direction.
So it would only require one subscription then through the secretary's office and not be an additional burden on cities and towns.
That's my understanding, yes.
Thank you.
From my reading of the information, that it is a list that's maintained and people are on it for a 2-year period. And that if we go in and check records, there's a very small fee per 1,000 records that you check, and that information could be put into ElectionNet, and therefore the supervisor of the checklist and the clerks would have the information through ElectionNet. Is there anything there that I messed up, Deputy Secretary?
You understand it the same way that I do, Senator.
Okay. Additional questions for the Deputy Secretary?
Move ought to pass. Have we already done that?
Nope, we were about to, so we've got a motion of ought to pass, and
Second.
from Senator Ward, and it's open to further amendments, so I'm guessing I'll get the motion for 12:35, is it?
Yes.
Okay.
I move amendment 1235 ought to pass.
Okay, and the chair will second that. Okay, further discussion on the amendment? Seeing none, we'll call the roll on the amendment. Senator Birdsell,
Yes.
Senator Ward,
Yes.
Senator Susie,
Yes.
Senator Perkins Coca,
Yes.
and the chair votes yes. And we'll move to the ought to pass motion as amended. Discussion? Seeing none, I'll call the roll. Senator Birdsell,
Yes.
Senator Ward,
Yes.
Senator Susie,
Yes.
Senator Perkins Coca,
Yes.
and the chair votes yes. Do we have a motion for consent?
So moved.
Second.
Motion and second for consent. Call the roll. Senator Birdsell,
Yes.
Senator Ward,
Yes.
Senator Susie,
Yes.
Senator Perkins Coca,
Yes.
and the chair votes yes. Do we have a volunteer to take that out?
I'll take it out.
Okay, that was Senator Ward.
Yes.
Yes.
All right, and I think we're at the time for our next hearing on 5/23.
If we come out of executive session.
We have a motion
Second.
and a second. I will call the roll. Senator Birdsell,
Yes.
Senator Ward,
Yes.
Senator Susie,
Yes.
Senator Perkins Coca,
Yes.
and the chair votes yes. And we are out of executive session and ready to start the public hearing. And if you would, when you're ready, would you call the first or the prime sponsor?
Yes, I will bring in the prime sponsor, Representative Gay.
Good morning, Representative. You're still muted, Representative. Representative Gay, you are muted.
I just asked her to unmute.
Okay. Let's look at the sign up sheet here. While she attempts to get unmuted.
We, as of right now, don't have anyone signed up to speak on the bill. We
Okay.
just have our prime sponsor here, but she's actually not signed up either.
All right. Representative Gay, you may want to log out and log back in of the system. Sometimes that helps you fix the problem. I will, if I can call up the bill here real quick, I will
You
ask
want me to
one,
introduce it?
if you would, Senator.
For the record, my name is Regina Bertzel, District 19, the towns of Derry, Hampstead, and Windham. And I'm here to introduce House Bill 523 FN. This bill requires voters who register to vote by using a qualified voter affidavit or sworn statement on the Election Day registration form instead of other approved IDs to have their photograph taken at the time of registration. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
All right. Look at that. Representative Gay, we don't see you muted, so try talking. Representative Gay.
Representative, if you are on the phone, you can dial *9 or press *9. I keep saying dial.
You're showing your age, Trisha.
I know. I keep doing that.
All right, is there, we'll keep Representative Gay there, and when she can speak, we'll try to get her to speak. Do I have any hands up to speak, since there was no one on the list to testify to begin with?
Yes, I have a hand from David Scanlon.
All right, Deputy Secretary.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Once again, members of the committee, I'm David Scanlon, Deputy Secretary of State. And just wanted to address the fiscal note for the committee. The way I understand this bill is that it is modeled after the process that a voter uses for obtaining a ballot, where if they don't have an acceptable form of ID to obtain their ballot, the voter would fill out a challenge voter affidavit and then have their photo taken at the polling place. When that law was enacted in 2012, we purchased cameras for every polling place. There are Polaroid style camera where there's film that is loaded in the camera, and once the picture is taken, the film it comes out of the camera and develops like a Polaroid, an old-fashioned Polaroid camera used to do. The reason that there is a fiscal note is because we figured that there are going to be additional cameras that will be necessary, at least in some polling places, if this is going to be a requirement of same-day voter registrants at the polling place, that there would actually need to be a camera located at the registration table instead of the other station for voters who don't have an acceptable form of ID. Obviously, in small towns, really small towns, one camera would probably suffice for both purposes. But certainly in the larger volume towns, multiple cameras would probably be needed. So the figure that was used in the fiscal note was planning on purchasing one camera for every polling place in the state of New Hampshire, along with the film that would be necessary to allow those cameras to be used. The other factor that comes into play is that the cameras that we originally purchased now are 10 years old, or will be 10 years old for the next election. I don't have an indication that the cameras are failing in any way, but at some point they're going to have to be replaced. So the number that was used in the fiscal note takes that into consideration as well. So with that, I would be happy to answer any questions the committee might have.
Questions, Senator Bertzel?
Just out of curiosity, have we thought about going to digital versus cameras? Or is this what this does?
To my knowledge, there was not a consideration for digital, but what I can relate to you from when we had this conversation in 2012,
Yeah.
for photo ID was that there was pushback at the time to have digital images stored on a camera of a voter's image. And to get away from that discussion and that debate, we believed at the time that, if a camera just simply did not keep a digital image, it simply produced a photograph from the camera, that it took away that particular issue. I don't know if people today are more comfortable having their digital images stored on cameras or not, but obviously the way this bill is written, it doesn't go there.
But, and follow up?
Yes, ma'am.
But even on a digital, can't we can still print it out and then just delete the picture, correct?
That's true, and that was part of the discussion at the time, was to show the voter the digital image on the camera being deleted.
Okay, thank you.
Just as clarification, the statute as written for people who are voting without an ID does allow for the use of the digital, does allow the printing of that, which would require us also to provide a printer to the polling places, which would be a much larger expense. Have I gotten all that right, Deputy Secretary?
Senator Gray, you're testing my memory, and I would have to go back and look at that particular statute to see if it would permit digital cameras to be used with printers. It may, but you are right that it would be that first of all, digital cameras are more expensive, and if printers are required in the polling place, that would also be significantly higher cost.
Okay, Senator Ward, you had a question.
I have a question. Yes. How often has this happened in the past that we have taken photographs?
Well, it happens every election, but what I can tell you is the number of voters that show up at the polling place without an acceptable form of ID that have to have their photograph taken is a fraction of 1%. I believe the last election was less than 0.5%.
Okay. Thank you.
Senator Susie, you had a question.
Thank you. I'm trying to figure out what the need would be to take the picture at registration if the person doesn't have an acceptable form of ID and is having it taken when they vote.
That is a good question, Senator Susie. The only thing I can think of is that they are separate processes. The act of voter registration is different than the registered voter obtaining their ballot.
But if I may just follow up, but if you're going to be doing it anyway, it seems like you might be photographing the same person twice, because I can't imagine there are many people going to the polls to register to vote, but then not casting a ballot. So perhaps I'm misunderstanding, but it would seem to me that
I think that what you're saying makes a lot of sense. It's just the coordination then between the registration table and the check-in table for obtaining a ballot, and how that process would work. In a small polling place, it probably be very easy to do, but in a very large polling place like a Bedford or a Merrimack or Londonderry, there would be some coordination that would need to take place. And something that could be done. It's just a matter of figuring out how to do it.
Thank you.
Has everybody else gotten their questions done? I do have a question for the Deputy Secretary. It is my understanding that when you are voting, you are filling out a challenged voter request or, certification, and that is only required to be kept for the 22 months, but that at the registration table, the information that you provide there is kept for 7 years after the voter is removed from the checklist. So very different criteria. Could you tell me if I'm correct, Deputy Secretary?
You are correct, Senator.
Also, my understanding that these records would be kept in different files, different organizations, so that if I did want to look at the registration from one person, and that the picture would be there in this system and not have to go to another file or another file to try and make sure that to be able to look at the picture. Am I correct there?
Yes, the supervisors of the checklist would be responsible for maintaining the registration records. The town clerk would be responsible for keeping the records of the challenge voter affidavit for obtaining a ballot. Those two entities, the clerk and the supervisors of the checklist, in most municipalities do work closely together. So you are correct that they, those documents are kept in separate locations, but there is the opportunity to coordinate their activities as well.
And I think one final one, if on the challenged voter, where we would normally take that second photo that Senator Susie talks about, if we noted on that form where the picture would be attached, that it is in fact attached to the registration form, if the picture was taken at the registration form, that you would have no objection to that.
Mr. Chairman, that was a question to me. We would have no objection to that.
But we probably would have to modify that statute. All right, if there are any other questions of the Deputy Secretary? Seeing none. Representative Gay, have we gotten you online yet?
So Representative Gay does have her hand raised, so she is indicating that she wants to speak. She is unmuted. I'm wondering if the device she's on maybe doesn't have a microphone or the permissions aren't set for it. Representative Gay, I would recommend calling in by phone, or maybe even submitting written testimony, Senator Gray. We have a hand from Representative Timothy Horgan.
Representative Horgan.
Oh, now I'm unmuted. So I'm Representative Timothy Horgan from Stratford County District 6, which is the towns of Durham and Madbury, which I guess not coincidentally, is it because it's university town for other reasons, does have probably more new registrants every election cycle than most towns. I fortunately hopped on as Representative Scanlon was finishing his presentation, so he may or may not have shared the statistics on how many people actually do sign up without a photo ID. It's a surprisingly it's a small number, although some people, for one reason or another, do not have photo IDs, and if they're still citizens of the United States over the age of 18 and live in New Hampshire, they still have the right to vote. So this is there's not a huge number of people using it, and the few people using it, for the most part, almost all do check out. So there's not the idea there's a flood of fictitious people signing up for elections is totally not borne out by the data. And I'm sure the Secretary of State's office would be glad to regale with you with it. I know in Durham, I think the first year we had it, the only person who had his picture taken was actually a longtime local resident who did it just to protest the law. So the number of people, so actually one problem with the existing law, and this will be even more so if you pass this law, is that, we have to set aside a table at the polling place. Not really a problem in Durham. We're one of the larger polling places in the state, but for a smaller one, we have to set aside this whole facility for something that's actually used very seldom. So I think this law is unnecessary. So I would probably urge you not to pass it, and save everyone's energy for changes which actually need to be made. So that's my position on it. So thanks for your time. Thanks.
Thank you. Our questions from the representative. Okay, seeing none.
Thanks.
Do we have anybody else with their hand up, or is Representative Gay back on?
Representative Gay, can you unmute now?
I do see a phone number that just joined us. I'm not sure if that is Representative Gay. I will bring them in just in case.
Phone number ending in 4321. Please identify yourself.
And if you could press *9 to unmute.
Or I think *6 works as well. If you press *6.
Hello?
Yeah, this is Kevin Landry. Yeah, this is Kevin Landry with the Union Leader. I'm just listening in, Senator.
Oh. All right. Well,
thanks.
Thank you.
Mute me. Thank you.
All right. Seeing that we haven't been able to contact the representative, we will close the public hearing on this bill and take a motion to go back into executive session.
So moved.
We have a motion and a second to go into executive session. I'm not exactly sure who did what, but we can look at the tape later, I guess. Senator Birdsall, call the roll. Calling the roll. Yes. All right. She's muted, but I saw her mouth move, right?
Yes.
Senator Ward.
Yes.
Senator Susie.
Yes.
Senator Perkins Smoka.
Yes.
And the chair votes yes. Before we get too much further, if we take the bill that we just heard, 523, the point I was trying to make in this is that there is a completely different record retention requirement if you look back into the municipal records on registration information and challenged voter information. I certainly don't believe that we need to take the picture twice. I would like the picture, if we're going to attach it to something, to attach it to that record, which is the longer kept record, which would be the voter registration information, which again is, if you go back into that statute, it's 7 years after the person is removed from the, and remember, we're not keeping that digital image. If someone were to use a digital camera and use a printer, that would not violate the law for someone who is voting. But that image would have to be deleted in the presence of the voter from that camera. So if anyone else wants to work on this, I would think that if we bring that other statute into an amendment, say that the photo requirement there, if someone is registering that same day and their picture was taken, that they could put a note on the registration form where the photo would be attached, and the one photo would be sufficient. So if there isn't any objection, I'll go work on that amendment. and bring it back to you. Questions, comments on that bill? Senator Perkins Quokka.
Yeah, I just, we didn't get to hear from the prime sponsor, so I just was wondering if the chairman happened to anecdotally have heard of a circumstance in which having this photo from registration would have been relevant. I know you're trying to streamline the process, and I appreciate that. I think taking the photo once, is the most we should do. And I understand the record keeping aspect, but is there a reason we need to take it at registration in the first place when we're already going to take it when they vote? I'm not getting an answer to that question.
Well, to me, the reason that you would do it the other way would be the record retention thing. If when we first required photo identification during voting, there was a particular representative here in Rochester that for the first 2 years that was invoked, made us go through the process, even though he was well known in the community, etc. It is a very rare circumstance now. Certainly, I'm not trying to make it onerous on the individual that, having their picture taken once instead of twice. I can fully understand that with the low occurrence of the number of photos that we take, moving the camera from the registration table to the ballot clerks, for that photo to be taken. I don't believe it will require a lot of additional cameras. There, as the deputy secretary said, that there may be a need to replace some of those. I'm not necessarily thinking that the state law, the way it is right now, would require us to replace those, but I'll let the legal scholars worry about that. So again, I'm trying to strike that balance. In my opinion, the people that you are looking at generally would not show up at the polls 2 years from the first time that they attempted to vote if they were to vote inappropriately. That being said, I think the more important picture to take would be the picture at the registration table, since those records are kept longer, but that's not what the bill does. It only affects that statute at the registration table. It doesn't affect what happens at the when they try to vote.
Right. Okay. Yeah. Thanks for the commentary. I mean, as I've said before, I think people are good. I don't think anyone is trying to, vote that shouldn't be voting for the most part. And I think this is an extremely small problem. So I just don't see the changes necessary. I appreciate the commentary and the discussion.
You need to get
Okay. Well, this working on an amendment will certainly give Representative Gay plenty of time to reach out to us via email or whatever. If there's any additional comments on that, but I'll mark mine.
The significance is when somebody is going to cast a ballot, right? To accept a ballot and then cast it. So I mean, I understand your point, Mr. Chairman, about record retention being longer, but I just don't. And maybe Representative Gay could enlighten us in written testimony. I just don't see the need to.
Well, it is true that we have the biggest uncontrolled source of people without having their identity checked was the absentee ballots, which we have already dealt with in the Senate bill, requiring at least some information from the individual. Again, that information trying to be as not onerous on the individual. Information that's easily obtained or already known to the individual, does not require them to spend any additional funds. if I were to go back to 2012, when we first started talking about this, Senator Birdsell, I, and Representative Sweeney were all on election law in the House that year. At the roots of these conversations, and it's possible that the registration form would be the place to do this, but again, that's not the bill that's in front of us. So, all right. So, any other comments on this one before we go back and look at the other ones? Certainly, I will make sure that you all have plenty of time to comment on what I write, and we will discuss it fully when we get to there. So if I go back to Trish, and we just were finishing with House Bill 285, and if we go through the list and talk to the other ones.
We are now on HB 476, and that was the one that had the hearing on the amendment as well last week.
Okay, 476, as best I know, that was the one that Senator Susie and I both had questions on. In the way that the bill is written, if a city decides that a particular ward needs to be divided into smaller section voting districts, that the statute that they are talking about for the city districts would allow the city district to have individuals working at each district that lived in the ward but may not necessarily live in that district. And that is what the Secretary of State, the reason he didn't have an objection was that they were all members of the same ward, which is pretty much the smallest district in a city that the Secretary of State makes distinctions at. That being the case, it does not affect the city in saying that if you are a resident of Ward 1, that you could be working at Ward 2 through whatever your city has, which was my concern, and it does not do that. Senator Susie, did you want to speak to that, or?
That was my understanding as well after we spoke, Representative Gray. I still have mixed feelings about the first part. I do understand trying to encourage people to vote. I always think it makes it easier on everyone to have local people and people from within their precinct there. I know one of the challenges is in some of the larger towns, but in the end, it's not the worst bill. I don't know that I particularly care for it, but I certainly understand the need to pass something that includes the amendment, because the amendment to the bill is critical for a town that made an error. So.
All right. So, any other discussion on it? So looking for an ought to pass motion on the bill.
So moved.
Senator Ward.
Second.
And seconded by Senator Birdsell. And the amendment number is?
The amendment number is 1127S.
1127S. Do I have a motion on the amendment?
Move on to pass.
Move on to pass on the amendment. Second by Senator Birdsell. Discussion? Seeing none, I will call the roll. Senator Birdsell.
Yes.
Senator Ward.
Yes.
Senator Susie.
Yes.
Senator Perkins Quokka.
Yes.
And the chair votes yes. Do I have any further amendments? Seeing none, the motion is ought to pass as amended. I'll call the roll. Senator Birdsell.
Yes.
Senator Ward.
Yes.
Senator Susie.
Yes.
Senator Perkins Quokka.
Yes.
And the chair votes yes. Do I have a further motion for consent?
Consent.
Senator Susie moves consent. Senator Birdsell seconds. I will call the roll. Senator Birdsell,
Yes.
Senator Ward,
Yes.
Senator Susie,
Yes.
Senator Perkins Quokka,
Yes.
and the chair votes yes. And anybody want to take that one on, or you want me to do it? All right, I'll do it. Okay. Tricia.
Okay, so then the last one from not today's bills was 484, HB 484. Relative to the budget committee recommendations on warrant articles.
That was another one that I was working on. And
Cordell was going to get some changes to the language or something. I have
well, both he and I have written a couple of words. He didn't even like the words he wrote because they started to modify the words that I did in the first place. So this one I think is still a work in progress. Is Cordell on the line?
Yes.
If he would like, we can let him speak. Oh, we also got Chris Holmes in. Oh.
Hello there.
Cordell, did you have anything that you wanted to say?
No.
Don't have to.
This is a bill that we didn't take a position on. I don't think we took a position on it. And as I said to you, every effort that you and I have made to come up with different language has, to me, just made things more complicated. And so, I mean, I think the bill as written is pretty simple. My view is unless we can come up with something that's something better, that's simple, either pass the bill as it is or kill it. The existing statute is already kind of confusing, and I'm just concerned about coming up with something that makes it even more confusing. And I realize that doesn't help you much.
Just for the rest of the committee, what I had suggested that we give them a format that they would have to adhere to, that they would list the line items or accounts in the budget that were affected by the warrant article, and then provide even possibly down to a sub-account level of how that money would. And there is the reason why Cordell said that we make it more complicated. Senator Susie and Senator Birdsell, I think, often say that I try to make things more complicated when I think I'm making it more easy. But, that being it as it is, unless somebody has something else to say, I will continue to try to work with Mr. Johnson and anyone else who wants to weigh in on this. They can send me an email on their suggested words. But we'll put that in the still pending list. Okay. And so that takes care of the old ones. All right, ones that we heard today that we haven't done anything on.
HB 98 and HB 263.
Okay. HB 98, moving the primary. Open it up for discussion.
Good idea. Support, needs work.
Exactly. Thank you. That's what I was going to say.
Then I would suggest that Senator Birdsell and Senator Susie try to get together and try to come up with those words, because we can't have more than a quorum of the committee doing that. we can't really add anybody else to that per RSA 91A. And so we'll look on from afar and appreciate the hard work that you ladies will put into that.
All right, and I also want to talk to the sponsors as well. Senator Susie, I'll talk to you, get some parameters, and then I'll talk to the sponsors and see if they're willing to work within those parameters.
Okay.
All right.
Okay. 263, is that the next one?
Yes.
Okay. And that's the one I was gone for part of, I think.
I'm not ready for this one. I need to delve into this a little bit.
Okay. And this one is, it was interesting, the $7,000 limit that would be placed on us. That's the right one, right?
Correct.
And shifting that money into a different way of doing it, which I found interesting. Right now, if you think about it, a candidate who decides to get into the race late because of maybe dissatisfaction with the other candidates that have filed, if the filing period is already started, then they are limited to $2,000, $1,000 for the primary and $1,000 for the general election, instead of the 7,000 that was talked about, because 5,000 of that would be primary money or pre-primary money. So that's kind of an interesting thing that I hadn't thought about before. Any other comments anybody wants to make? Do we have somebody who wants to take the lead on this? Seeing none, I will. And anybody that wants to weigh in on it, please contact me and with your thoughts, and we'll see where it goes from there. Senator Ward.
Mr. Chair, didn't Dave Scanlon said that he will be willing to work with somebody to clean it up, because he said it was very confusing to begin with?
Well, I think that part of it, the confusing, that's a larger project. That if you take the campaign finance stuff and you look at the way it talks to a candidate committee, a political committee, and the other things that are in there, and it all tries to do it within a few paragraphs. And then, so I thought his comments, yes, this was complicated, but when you look at all the different organizations that we talk about, that really start to get complicated, and they would like us to work on that, and come back and have a more comprehensive bill on campaign finance that would not just talk about the candidates and candidate committees, but the whole gamut of finance reform.
Okay.
But again, Senator Ward, we can, if you have a good idea to put something in there or change the law the way it is, certainly we will not reject it offhand. We will do whatever we can to make sure that the committee understands it and weighs in on whether it's a good idea or not.
Good. I would have to put in a considerable amount of time to delve into the whole election law issue before I offer any suggestions.
Hey, it's a wonderful place to go. I mean, you can get lost in statutes, but I used to read those books before every election, so that when the voters came in, that when I was moderator, I could try to answer the questions.
Mm-hmm.
All right, so that does it for that.
Move we come out of executive session?
Okay, we'll have a motion to come out of executive session, seconded by Senator Birdsall. And I will call the roll. Senator Birdsall,
Yes.
Senator Ward,
Yes.
Senator Susie,
Yes.
Senator Perkins Coca,
Yes.
and the chair votes yes. And I'm sure I've got a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
We got any motions to adjourn. And at least one of those we'll say is a second. All right, I will call the roll. Senator Birdsall,
Yes.
Senator Ward,
Yes.
Senator Susie,
Yes.
Senator Perkins Coca,
Yes.
and the chair votes yes. Ladies, thank you. And
Oh,
just one thing, what would you read the list of bills that we'll have on for next week, if you would, Trish?
Yes, I have them.
So everybody can copy those down.
Yes. I have them right here. Next week will be HB 292, HB 326, HB 391.
what was the second one, Trish? I'm sorry.
That's okay. 326,
Okay.
and then HB 555.
And that only leaves us one bill for the next week,
Yep.
which is bill number
291.
291. And then we're going to try to give you your Monday mornings free as soon as we can get the work done. When we get to the 291, when we schedule that, we probably can schedule that one a little later in the day, maybe 10 o'clock instead of 9 o'clock.
Okay.
Just for anybody's planning. And since we're really not in session right now, I'm going to shut up and bid you ladies farewell.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye. Bye.
Bye.